Vladimir Putin has ruled Russia for more than 18 years. And in all these years, instances of political opposition against him have been few and far between. Putin has ruled Russia with an iron fist. Last year, he won re-election by a record margin, a landslide. His main rival, Alexei Navalny, was barred from the race. In all these years, his popularity ratings have remained higher than most of his international peers. But now, opposition protests are becoming far too frequent in Russia. So much so that the president faces the charge of blocking opposition leaders from contesting elections altogether. Over the weekend, a major protest erupted in Moscow. Several independent leaders wanted to contest the local body polls in Russia's capital, but applications of many of these people were rejected. A protest followed. According to some estimates, more than 2,000 protesters turned up in central Moscow on Sunday. The local authorities did not sanction these protests, and to turn up without permission is rare in Russia, and yet these protesters went ahead with their demonstration. They carried out a march from the office of the mayor to the headquarters of the Election Commission. The local police did not do anything at the beginning, but as the numbers swelled, as more people joined the protest, the police launched a crackdown. Dozens of these protesters were arrested. The entire row is over the applications of independent candidates. As per the law in Russia, every independent candidate must get 5,000 signatures to qualify for election. But the Russian Election Commission has dismissed several applications, saying that these signatures were forged. Some of them were rigged. The rejects are now crying foul, and they say that the government is using the Election Commission to keep them out of the ballot. They blame the Kremlin and politicians close to Putin. Questions abound now on what is happening. Is Putin's team behind all of this? If yes, why do they have to resort to something like this? Do they fear an adverse verdict in the upcoming election? And is Vladimir Putin losing his grip on Russia? We spoke to Harry Horton, Wion's correspondent in Moscow. He reports that opposition parties in Russia believe that they have a fighting chance to take Putin down this time.
Absolutely. And look, if you speak to the opposition activists, they're pretty hopeful about these protests. They say that in their view, the mood has shifted somewhat in Russia. The last time these local elections were held in Moscow was back in 2014. It was just after Russia annexed Crimea during the start of the conflict in Ukraine. The opposition activists say at that time, public opinion was split. There was a lot of confusion. It was very hard to rally people around the opposition parties. They think now, 5 years later, the mood is different. They think that if they do manage to get themselves on the ballot paper, they can command a lot of support and perhaps go about some sort of electoral surprises in those local elections in Moscow. Now, many people will be very sceptical that can happen. There's a lot of hurdles they've got to pass before they can get to that stage. But the opposition activists appear at this moment to feel as though that the momentum is with them. And they, as I say, they hope to organise more protests, certainly for today and possibly in the coming weeks ahead as well.
It's not just the opposition. Anti-establishment protests in Russia have been on the rise. Last month, hundreds of people rallied against what they called abuse of power by the police in Moscow. The protest was sparked by the arrest of an investigative journalist on trumped-up drug charges. He was later released due to lack of evidence. The protesters demanded the release of political prisoners, and they say that several people are routinely arrested either because of their beliefs or just to improve the police record. Of course, this doesn't look good for Russia's strongman Vladimir Putin. He's facing new challenges at home. In May this year, the Moscow Times reported that the Russian president's ratings have dropped to their lowest level since 2006. A state-run poll found that nearly 32% of Russians now trust Vladimir Putin, but removing him from power still remains a very long shot. Vladimir Putin still exercises a lot of power over Russian institutions. By winning the last election, he extended his rule till 2024. And no potential challenger is in sight. The Russian president will call the shots for the foreseeable future.